Okay, good morning. This is our October version of a slice out of my strategy playbook. We're going to be looking at annual planning because this is the time of the year when it's a good to start thinking about that. I have, I would say, about half my clients that are starting into annual planning now, and the other half will start in November, all of which designed to get it done by December. So on the agenda today is I just want to talk briefly about my background and then also why strategy is important, and then we'll look into that annual planning slice. Specifically, I want to look at how do you evaluate the priorities that you've chosen. So you go through a process, you come up with a list of a half a dozen or so priorities for your annual plan. How do you know whether they're the right ones or whether they're good ones? So I want to just show you a couple of tools that I use to assess that. And then I'll talk about how to learn more if you're interested, and we'll have some Q&A time too. A lot of people ask me about the name Phimation, so I want to talk briefly about that to start. Phi is actually the ratio of spirals. It's an actual number itself, 1.618. It's if you look at how spirals develop, it happens in that ratio. So Phimation is the universe's natural process of growth that enables both the function currently and expansion. And again, that's what a spiral does, and that's what a lot of growing companies need to do. So Phimation is a very relevant concept for the small companies and growth companies that we work with. My background, I'll just focus in on the right-hand side here of the screen, is I've probably done, well, I've done over 2,000 strategy meetings. Some of those have been an hour workshop, and then others have been full-day meetings. But at this point, I'm in the thousands. The money that my clients have invested in me and that I've invested in the work that I've done, all of which I consider R&D to get to the tools and the insights that we have today, have totaled about $4 million now. So if for new clients that are coming in, you're kind of benefiting from a lot of that R&D. And I have 20 active clients. Just 3 of those involve me at a very deep level, as if I'm on their management team. And I have others that either participate in a monthly group coaching call or monthly coaching calls as well. But I do have a whole range between very kind of light touches, a half hour to an hour a month, to very in-depth engagement with just a few clients. All right, so let's start by looking at why strategy is important and why it can be hard. A lot of people will say, well, what actually is strategy? And it can be many things, but I think the thing that's most useful to think about is strategy is really about making choices. Choices then are, of course, about decisions. And if you unpack what a decision is, it's basically 2 elements. There's the options that go into the decision, and then the evaluation criteria. And so one of the things that's happening these days is there are some deep societal shifts that are making people have more decisions, more options, and more criteria to deal with. So the change and disruption is meaning that people have to make more decisions than they used to. It used to be that they could make, they could write a plan for 3 to 5 years and not have to reevaluate it. Now you have to reevaluate things more frequently. So we're making more decisions. Because of the abundance of the world, the 2,000 TV channels, the 100,000 YouTube channels, there's simply more options than there ever have been before that we have to consider. And then the uncertainty that's happening in the environment, and I see this throughout my client base, there's just an uncertainty about what the future holds. What that means is that there's more criteria that you have to evaluate, because one decision could look good if it's made within the context of a solid revenue stream and things, looking kind of steady going forward. That same decision could be a poor one if that revenue isn't there, and it you don't have the stable base to work off of. So all of these things are just taking, there's more to deal with, and what that means is you have to be more conscientious about a structured, thoughtful strategy process. Another way to show this is a graph here that on the y-axis shows familiarity. And so if it's a highly familiar situation, something you've seen before, that's down at the bottom. Something that's new would be up at the top. And then on the x-axis, the complexity. So if it's something that isn't very complicated, then it's on the left. And if it's something that's highly complicated, it's on the right. And from a broad perspective, because of the changes that are happening, we're in a less familiar, more complex space, just more naturally all the time than we ever have been before. And so the old days are down in the lower left. We're either in the upper right or expanding the box of the upper right to whole new areas. And I'll talk about what that means in just a second here. There's also, so that's the external environment is kind of pushing us naturally up and to the right in this chart. In addition to that, there are some internal strategies that when they happen are more in the upper right-hand quadrant. So one is if you're going through a business transition, if your business is accelerating, if you're changing markets, or if you're going into new markets, if you're developing new functions in your organization, or if you're coming up with new approaches. So anytime you're dealing with that new or change, that's going to be in the upper right. And what that means is where the lower left of this chart is something that you can handle intuitively. So your sense of where things are and what's happening and what the right choices are, your sense is very good if you're in the lower left quadrant. But if you're in the upper right quadrant or somewhere outside of that lower left, your intuition is actually not going to be as helpful as you might think. And so that's why it helps to have some structured tools, some structured process to work through and to think about all the things that are happening. Intuition means that you can shorthand a lot of things, and you just can very quickly draw conclusions and jump from A to B, A to D, and you've internalized what B and C look like, and they're right. If you're in a more complicated or more unfamiliar place, if you just jump from A to D, the chances are lower that you got B and C right. So it's better to have a structured process that says, let's go from A to B to C to D to get to the right place. So that's some general background about what's happening in the marketplace and what can be happening in the business, where it makes sense to use some of the tools like what I'm going to show you today. A lot of time, I think it's really important that outside consultants do no harm. So we don't want to over-design or we don't want to interfere with things that are already working, and that's where if you can handle things with intuition, we want to be able to, because that's faster, easier, and probably more effective. But if you're not in the lower left quadrant, we need to have some tools to help make the right decisions. All right, so let's just take a slice of annual planning. First of all, I want to talk about, a lot of people know the revenue funnel. There's a very similar strategy funnel that fewer people are aware of, so let me just talk through what that looks like. At the top are opportunities and needs, just a whole mash. In any one company, there are probably at least 30 opportunities and needs that are happening at any one time. And I've seen lists of 80 or 100 for some of my bigger clients. So it's just a whole mash of opportunities and needs that are up there. And it's the first step is to look into those and identify what are some options that we have. Let's define the options that we have for addressing these opportunities and needs, because we can't do all 30 of them. So which are the ones that we're going to focus on? So define the options of what the focus could be, then decide on the priorities. And one important step that I go through with my clients is prioritizing the priorities. So there's a multiple steps or multiple levels of prioritization. But define the options, then decide the priorities. Then those priorities are probably going to take investment. So then you want to justify the investment that's involved, and then plan at a kind of action level. What are the initiatives that are going to come out of those investments and those priorities? And then lastly, you want to manage, let's set up the performance. What are the key performance indicators? What does success look like? And manage to that to get to the returns and value that come at the other end of the funnel. So I put a star next to the kind of right after justifying the investments and before planning the initiatives. And that's when I like to do like a quality check of the priorities that we have, because it's one thing to say, here are the priorities, here's what we're going to focus on, and then go and realize that they're going to require more investment than you have. And so at that point, you should do some kind of quality check that says, all right, given that we can't invest in everything that we wanted to, would it be better, let's say we had a half a dozen priorities identified, would it be better for us to just pick 3 and really do those strongly and focus our investment all in that, or is it better to do all 6, but we're going to have to spread ourselves a little thin on all 6 of those? So after the investments, the justification step is when I like to do this quality check. And I have a few tools, but the one that I wanted to show today is a simple cost-benefit chart. A lot of strategy is about return on investment. Another name for return is benefit. Another name for investment is cost. So this is really an ROI chart in its simplest form. So on the y-axis is categorizing what's going to be the impact of the benefit of doing this on the business, really broadly. Is it going to be low, medium, or high? And then also on the investment side, is it going to be a low, medium, or high investment? I find that once people go through this one time, and once people look at a half a dozen different initiatives or priorities to put in here, that any confusion that they have about what does low cost mean, what does high benefit mean, really kind of goes away pretty quickly, because they can see the different options that they're dealing with, and it's once they get that relative, oh yeah, that one's clearly higher benefit than the other one. Once they see that relationships, then they quickly put them in the different boxes. And with a lot of these charts, I'm less interested in the actual answer and more interested in the conversation that happens around it. So we would plot, or you can plot, each of the priorities or each of the initiatives on this graph and get a sense of, are we all in the high benefit, high cost? Do we have some that are low cost? And it'll give us a sense of what the portfolio, the investment portfolio, looks like. But there's also one overlay that I do on this to also check, and so that's this graph that I'm showing now. So again, the structure is the same with benefit and cost, but here's what the different areas of the chart mean. I'm going to start in the lower left. So if we have something that's low benefit and low cost, that's really about continuous improvement. We should always be working to get 5% better every time. And the kinds of initiatives in annual planning that might show up here is to say, we need to make our finances better and we need to have continuous improvement there. So it's less about the actual improvement itself, some actual improvement, and more about we need to have continuous improvement in this particular area. So that's lower left. If we go clockwise, a high benefit, low cost initiative or priority is something that really, it just, you've been doing it in a way that really doesn't make sense, and you finally get people together to talk about it, and they go, oh yeah, why are we doing it that way? We shouldn't do it. I worked with a client recently that had put somebody in charge of project management and never defined what project management was. So that person had been working for 3 years without really a job description, hadn't known. So we had about a 20-minute conversation about what project management is, what they needed to be doing, and immediately the ROI out of that position increased by probably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times because they were actually doing what the business needed them to. In the upper right-hand corner is, really changing the business, new business models, transforming what markets or how you do business. And that's going to be high benefit and high cost. And then lower right-hand corner is a high cost but low benefit. That's replacing the roof, replacing the carpeting. It's just something you have to do to stay in business. It could be, doing some kind of backup system for your computers. It's more playing defense than playing offense, but it's a necessary thing. And then there's the gray area, which is kind of in between and all of that, and that's just the company evolving and innovating. So when I have people chart the priorities on this graph of cost and benefit, the next thing I'll look at is, do we have something in all four quadrants? We don't have to, but over the course of 2 or 3 annual planning cycles, I would like to see something in all four quadrants here. And if we're not, then we're probably underinvesting in some part of the business. All right, so again, as we go in annual planning throughout this funnel, there's all kinds of tools that we can use to structure that, and I talk about those in more detail on Friday. We have the a strategic leader webinar that's going to go into more detail and show more charts about how to handle each one of these different steps in the annual planning process. But for now, that's the slice that I have, and let me just open up and see if anybody has any questions. We got 5 or 10 minutes here if anybody does. You can either type it in. I'll be checking here. I'm going to unmute. Looks like I have a couple of folks that I still haven't unmuted, so I'm going to unmute you. And if you want to mute yourself, then you can either on the dashboard or with your phone. All right, so everyone's unmuted now. Any questions about what I covered, or any comments that we should talk about? All right. All right, so then let me wrap up and tell you, if you are interested in getting the tools or hearing the discussion about the whole annual planning process, I have a $100 starter kit that gives you access to Friday's call on annual planning. It's, let me highlight here, so it's part of this strategic leader program that I do. It's an hour every month. We cover a different topic. You can see we've covered sales process, performance reviews, dashboards. This month is annual planning. Next month is going to be annual budgeting. And I go into more depth about how to handle it and the tools that I have in my toolkit. And then we also have a good amount of time, somewhere between a half hour and 45 minutes. Usually a half hour and 40 minutes to do coaching or questions and answer, either about the topic that we're talking about or really about anything that's going on. So the starter kit has a 3-month trial for that program. I have a similar program for middle managers called the Rising Leader Program. This is for high potential people in your organization that need some training. They're the potential future VPs or president, that higher level, but they're not there yet, and they want some exposure and some development to know what path should they be on to become a vice president, and how can they work more effectively with the vice presidents and the presidents in the organization. And so that Rising Leader program really takes a lot of the work that I do with the executives and then translates it into a more practical and kind of training or educational view for these rising leaders. I also include the strategy toolkit, which is the decision grid that you saw with the cost and benefit, and I think there's a dozen others tools like that, a people assessment one, a market assessment one that you can use in your annual planning and any of your strategy work, really. It also has a template for developing blog content, like a worksheet that you can use. It has a template for a performance review and development plan for employees, and it also has a template for a business case. So we talked about that, justifying the investment. That really comes from a business case, and there's an outline there for what a business case would look like. And then the last part of the starter kit is the Stage 2 Owner's Manual, which is like a workbook for an owner of a company that's gotten out of startup and is now in Stage 2, usually above a dozen people, above $1 million in revenue. And it covers all kinds of topics: leadership, planning, change, talent, marketing, sales. There's a dozen different chapters working with trends in your industry. So all of that is designed to just give you a snapshot of the work that I do, see if it might be of interest, and then if it is, then you have the tools in the upper part of this chart here with the owner's manual and the strategy toolkit, and then the access to the coaching on a regular monthly basis for both you, anybody that you want to have on your executive team, and on your middle managers too. Those programs down below are open to anybody that you'd want to include. So thank you for joining me today. Again, if you have any interest in this, give me a call. I think my number should be at the top of the slide here. So give me a call or send me an email if you're interested in participating on Friday, and if you want to do that starter kit. Otherwise, we'll have another slice next month, and I'm pretty sure that it will be annual budgeting. I usually let the Strategic Leader Program group choose what the topic is, but this time of year is such a good one for annual planning and annual budgeting that I'm pretty sure that that's what we'll be focused on. So I'll hope to see you either on Friday or next month. Thanks for participating.